Hi, my name is Sunny Stubbs, and I am a second year student in the MFA program in theater education at Mississippi University for Women. And this is my Ancient World project on constructing an Ionic chiton with fibulae for my costume design and construction course. The prompt for this assignment is create a piece based on one of the pieces from the ancient world, utilizing whatever tools and materials we have on hand. In this presentation, I will discuss my project selection, the Ionic chiton, the materials I used, my process, and the skills I developed. The Ionic chiton was a garment much like a dress worn by women in ancient Greece. The garment was a large piece of fabric that could be up to 9 feet long. The chiton was attached together with brooches called fibulae. For this project, I used some fabric bolts I had on hand, some drapes and curtain rings I had from IKEA, my sewing machine, thread, tape measure, and measuring board. Also, I know this is a costume class, but I felt that I needed something I could hang this garment on so I could see it as I worked on it. So I took an old 1x2 and some scrap lumber I had and created a dress form of sorts with some help from a friend. So in full transparency, I had some drill issues and my ripsaw broke, so a friend came over and helped. The first thing I did is to wash all the fabric. Then I cut the fabric into two 4.5 feet pieces and I trimmed them. I really liked this fabric's unfinished edge, so I used an over edge stitch on the edges that would be the top of the garment, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. Using the drapery rings, I marked 12 buttonholes 1 inch from the fabric line. Then I stitched the buttonholes, and that's another thing I'll talk about more later. And next, I fastened the panels together by hooking the curtain rings through the buttonholes. Then I draped the chiton on the dress form just to get an idea of what it was going to look like on a person and how it was going to drape. And here is the final product on my model. The chiton is a 2-panel piece sewn at the sides and attached with 6 fibulae on each arm. It measures from the neck to the wrist and almost falls to the floor. There's a 9-inch gap in the neckline for your head to go through. And these are the exact measurements I wanted it to have, so I was very happy with that and how it turned out. Here's a look at the final product and the original inspiration image. I can now see how this garment could be 9 feet long. Originally, I couldn't picture that in my mind, and I didn't have 9 feet of fabric, but again, I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. And finally, here's what it looks like, the final product, when I added the corning and the belts to it. Before I close, I want to talk a little bit about what I learned because I learned so much from working on this project. The 2 skills I really grew in were making over edge stitching and also making buttonholes. In undergraduate school, I worked in a costume shop that had an industrial overlock machine and I loved it. I've always been drawn to this unfinished edge look, and so I've always overlocked materials when I can. I've also heard throughout the years that a regular sewing machine can have an overlock stitching, but I've never sat down and tried to figure out how to do that or practice. So this was an amazing experience to actually sit down and practice overlocking, or what they call over edge. Now, I'm really happy that I did, but I do have to say that I really like the industrial overlock better. I'm not as happy with the standard sewing machine stitch, but I'm really glad I just sat down and figured out how to do this. The next skill I really developed was making buttonholes. I have made 1 to 2 buttonholes in my life before this project, but I had no idea how to do this or how to even get started. So I thought this would be a really good project to do that because I knew there were several buttonholes. So I was going to have to do a lot of repetition of the buttonholes. So I started with a sewing sampler and made 2 or 3 buttonholes, and then I made a total of 12 for the garment, and I just got better and better and better as I went, and now I think I can do it from memory. So as I said, I really learned a lot in this project. It was an amazing experience, and thank you so much for the opportunity. This is my works cited. I went to YouTube a lot to study different um, technical skills.